All right, welcome back everybody to Cultivating Connections. I'm Amanda Brozana-Rios, the Communications Director for National Grange. Today, we had a change of schedule, and it actually allows me to have a few minutes to talk about a really important issue in the Grange. So some of you were coming at 6:30 p.m. tonight to take a virtual tour of a dairy farm, the Jordan Farm in Massachusetts. And we unfortunately had to postpone that. I'm sure anybody who's ever worked or lived on a farm knows that some things are out of our control. And so the family asked that we are able to do that in about 2 weeks. And so we'll join you with that same virtual live tour on the 16th of June in the evening. But today I get to talk a little bit about an important issue, which is staying on the right side of copyright law. Some of you may remember that last week on Tuesday, we had Jim Bykoff, who is our trademark attorney for the National Grange, on to talk a little bit about our trademark. But in that, he also talked about what is copyright and what is infringement and some things like that that are important. What we didn't get to talk about a lot during that presentation was the fact that Granges are responsible for making sure that they use trademarks and copyrighted material appropriately. And by that, I mean that if we use trademarks or copyrighted material that we do not have the rights to use, a Grange can be given a cease and desist letter. They can get a bill for use of that property, that intellectual property, or they can end up having to go to court, depending on how far that process goes down the road. So specifically, I know that we have a lot of questions that revolve around the use of images, because you're on social media and you see people using photos on their posts a lot. You may be building your Grange website, and obviously you need photos or images on your website. You may be creating flyers or other promotional material for your Grange. You may be creating merchandise for your Grange. And all of those typically require some type of use of images. And those images can come, and often do come, from our members. One example is our cover for the Good Day magazine last issue was this photo of masks being made by one of our members. Her husband took that picture. He took that picture and gave it to us with permission to use. That was very simple. We were just able to ask for a photo. We knew that she was making these masks. They took a photo, they sent it, and I had made clear that it would be used in Good Day. And they said, that's great. So if you have a photo that you've taken or someone in your Grange has taken specifically for your use, that's a fantastic way to not only promote what skills you have or your Grange members have, but also to make sure that you don't have any liability with copyright issues. However, oftentimes we come across the fact that we don't have some of those things in our stockpile. For example, I may not have in our stockpile a picture of some goats running around in a field, and I may need something that depicts something with goats, and I may not have anybody at my ready use to ask if they can go and take a photo. And so I will have to go out and find a photo that works for that project, whether it's my newsletter, whether it's our magazine, whether it's our social media channels. It might be what's called a vector image, which is something you typically use when you're designing shirts or other places where illustrations are used. And so it's important to me that I make sure that what I provide as that image is content that we're legally able to use. Sometimes that's really hard to determine. And it comes down to the fact that a lot of folks don't know that you can't just use whatever's out there. So we often see that our Grange members are pulling for their newsletters or for their websites or for their social media photos that they found on Google. This is the first and most primary thing that I really want to stress to you, which is photos found on Google are not automatically fair use. In fact, when it comes to photos that are out there, most are not fair use. Most you need to get permission to use, and some you will need to pay to use. So just being able to go and type into Google, for example, goats, is not going to provide you a bunch of images that you are able to download or drag and drop and use on your sites or on your social media or anything like that. In fact, if it's found that you're using somebody else's intellectual property, and that's what it is, it's property, without their permission, without their knowledge, something that isn't what's considered Creative Commons or open use, you can get into some serious trouble with the creator and with a lawyer that they may have engaged. Now, I'm talking about this from the national standpoint, and you're thinking, well, you know, lots of laws and you've gotten lots of training in this. And certainly I do have some training in this area, but I'll tell you that it's a complicated subject that even the National Grange has had to have checks and balances in place, because at times we will sometimes pull an image and then have to figure out, do we have the appropriate use documents? Do we have the appropriate permissions and able to use that on our website, to use that in our social media, to use that on our brochures? And it's important that we make sure we do, because, for example, there are law firms that have been engaged by certain creators or producers, like the Associated Press, which I'll talk about in a second, who are engaged specifically to find uses of these photos where we do not have license or agreement, and contact you, and they require a fee. It doesn't matter if you take those down. It doesn't matter if you say we'll stop using them. And it doesn't even matter if you ask if you can retroactively have permission. Those firms specifically will ask for several hundred or $1,000, depending on its use and depending on what you've been doing with it. For example, if you've monetized the page in which you're using it, or you've put it on a shirt or some other item that you're selling and merchandising. So it's important that if you are getting some of these images to use in any way, that you are sure what you're getting won't get your Grange in trouble. Because let's be honest, there's not a lot of Granges with a ton of money in their treasury to throw away for mistakes when it comes to something that we could easily avoid. So today I thought it was appropriate for me to be able to give you some resources and sites where you can find what is something you can use, and walk through a little bit of some of the other options that you might have. So I'm going to switch to sharing my screen. Now, I should remind you, you're more than welcome to offer questions or comments in our comments bar here in YouTube or Facebook. But since it's only me today, I may not be able to respond directly to them in the comments, or I may not get to them until closer to the end of this presentation, just because I won't be able to have my eyes on multiple places of different screens. So please bear with me. As you put up comments and questions, when you think of them, that's no problem, but it may take me a little bit to get around to answering those towards the end of the presentation. So feel free to put any comments and questions in that comment section, but please have patience. I will get around to answering them. So let me share my screen. All right, here we are. So I'm going to start with talking about some things that you probably don't care about, just because I want to hit them and then get rid of them, okay? So the first thing is, you can buy a subscription to places where you can then download photos that, because your subscription money has been paid, you have use rights to all of the things that you download there. One example, probably one of the most primary examples, is this thing called Adobe Stock. Adobe Stock has so many images. It's millions and millions of images that are both photos, what we call vectors or illustrations or graphics, and all kinds of things that you can use. And the National Grange has a subscription because, of course, we have so many different publications, social accounts, and different things that we have to have you know, a wide variety of things at our fingertips. But frankly, it is a $30+ a month subscription. So for most local Granges, this is a little bit out of reach and not really very attractive. But Adobe Stock is there. Additionally, there's Shutterstock. Sorry, you're seeing all of my things come up here. Shutterstock, we do not have a subscription with. And so if we purchase images, we typically have to purchase them individually. And let's say that we like this image. We would grab it, and I have absolutely no idea why a golden shrimp came up. Anyway, let's say we grabbed one of the images here. We could download this image, but we would have to figure out what our use was going to be, make sure that we compare licenses and see if we're going to use it in a way that we're not allowed, or we would have to pay for the image. So this image, for example, we can download immediately, and we can use it in a variety of ways. This is called a royalty-free image, and this is actually a really, really good place to start. However, some of the ways it notes that you're not allowed to use it, go back, is included in like outdoor or print advertising, or viewership over 500,000. So I could use this image in our National Grange magazine, or on one of our other print products, because we don't have a circulation over 500,000. Your state newsletters won't have that either. So this would be an image you could use. You can't use it on merchandise, clothing, or artwork. So I can't make a poster out of this. Poster is considered artwork, even if it's just a poster that you're giving out to your members, and you're expecting them to hang them on their walls of their dorm rooms or in their home or whatever. That's considered artwork, and this is something where you would need an enhanced license. Last thing is web or print design templates. So obviously web, if you're using this on your website, that you would need an enhanced license. Print design templates is something where you're using this over and over, and you are basically like putting it in our brochures. If we created a template brochure for you where you could type in your information for your Grange and this image was in there, we would need an enhanced license. I know that the rest of the options that we have, now notice web also means social media, so you can't use it there. But the rest of the options that we talked about where we could use it, for example, in our magazine, or if you have a State Grange newsletter that's printed, it says royalty-free. Royalty-free means you do not have to pay for it as long as you are running by these specific principles that is outlined, okay? So you'll see on a lot of these type of images some discussion about what you can and can't use. There are also images that you can't use at all without having purchased them. Now, you see that was a moon image. And if I were to Google moon and I go to images and I find all these beautiful images that we see up here, and I'm hoping you're seeing all of them as well. And I say, hey, I really like this image. That's a great moon. I want to use that. You notice down here it says images may be subject to copyright. Now, that's on almost every image that you will find on Google, because they don't get down to the nitty-gritty and specifics of what image allows you what use. But there is a way on Google for you to separate out a little bit with some security what you may and may not be able to use. So after you've hit Google, you've put in your search term, let's say farm. You want to make sure that you've clicked over to this thing that says images. And then you can go to tools. And under here, you see a thing that says usage rights. If you have Google on any browser, you will find these buttons. So images, tools, usage rights. And this is where you want to drop down usage rights. And now they give you some options labeled for reuse with modification. Well, you are looking to reuse this photo. No matter what you're doing with it, you are hoping to put it into a publication, put it on social media, put it on your website, whatever it is, you are reusing it. So all of these are labeled for reuse. Labeled for reuse, reuse with modification, for non-commercial reuse, and non-commercial reuse with modification, okay? So let me go through those. All of these are reuse, but some of them are labeled for reuse, which means theoretically, you should be able to use them even when you are selling the product you've put them on. So if you're making a poster and you're selling it, even if you are only selling a half dozen of them, you'd be looking for something that says labeled with reuse. If you are using it just on something of your own, let's say you're using it just in an informational setting like the newsletter of your subordinate or your state Grange, you can hit labeled for reuse, non-commercial reuse. Okay. Some places will say that commercial and non-commercial reuse is literally the distinction between any dollar you could possibly bring in. So if you would use one of these farm images on a brochure, you could potentially be bringing money into your Grange. And some creators will believe that that was constituted commercial use, because even though your Grange is a nonprofit, money didn't go to an individual, and that money is being used for the community, there was still money made for that organization or institution based on a product that they created. So it would be like if you braided somebody's hair and they went out and they said, oh, look at the wonderful job I did with my hair. And they started replicating what you had done with other people's hair, and you never credited them. And then at the end of the day, you said, hey, I was the one who made that concept. I was the one who performed that task. I should have had some credit, and I didn't get it. There is some issue there, right? You at least have a feeling that you were ripped off. And so it's the same kind of idea, but it's crossed over to a boundary where the creators have the ability to monetize their product and also use their product and attach it to only the things that they believe in. And so because they weren't given that option to decide where their material was reused, and they chose not to allow reuse and you still used it anyway, that's where the problem lies. Okay. So when something is labeled for reuse, that's where I typically click, because those, for example, are in things like public domain, or they have gone into what's called public domain or Creative Commons, and it allows you to use those typically without having to worry about that copyright issue. So let's say I really like this photo. This is the one I want. You'll notice it still says images may be subject to copyright. And so this is where you're going to want to go and actually click on the full photo, and you're going to want to see where this came from. Publicdomainpictures.net is a place where you can go get photos. You can learn a little bit about where these photos came from. Sorry, I didn't mean to click on there. I was looking for a different button. And typically, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. You can see if you're able to use this free or if you need a premium license. So this license is under what's called CC0 public domain. What does that mean? It means that you can use and modify it for your personal and commercial projects. If you intend to use the image you find here for commercial use, please be aware that some photos do require a model or property release. Pictures featuring products should be used with care. Okay, so you've read that and you're sitting there and thinking, all right, I am going to use it in my brochure that is potentially commercial project, but it is under that public domain license. So this is something that you can use a free download of. If you wanted to use it in something that was maybe a billboard or in larger spaces, you'll notice that it's got a larger pixel size, and that you may have to pay for just because they would like to obviously have some monetization of that photo. All right, so we've kind of covered where you can go. I am not by any means saying that every photo that you find by using this Google Images tools labeled for reuse will be 100% copyright free. Every image you should scrutinize. So if you go to Google and you use an image, I really, really, really implore you to scrutinize that you have read the rights of that photo or contacted the distributor or the creator of the photo, if it's credited, to see if it's something that you can use. but you're saying, I don't have a ton of time to do that. Trust me, I am the queen of not having a ton of time to do those type of things. So obviously, this is a useful tool, but here are the ones that I find a little bit more useful, okay? All right, so we're gonna close that off. So the first place is what's called Creative Commons. And I probably should have started with the front page of that site. So Creative Commons is a website that you can search images from. And so all you have to do is click there, search images. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do rural this time. In rural, you will come up with all of these beautiful photos that the creators typically have tagged. They've told the search engine what to consider this. And so we're getting into all of these photos that have been given, okay? All right, so let's go to the photo of the horse. All right, so you'll notice that it's got some icons up here. And this is important for you to pay attention to, all right? So we're gonna go to this drop down right here that says licenses. This is probably the most important part of this Creative Commons site. This is licenses. And it's because over here you can find out what this means. So CCO that you saw before, these works are considered public domain. These are works that you will have absolutely no problem using in any way that you want. That means if you want to use these pictures directly as they are on brochures, on posters, on t-shirts, you can use them in any way you want, okay? So we always click that one off. Public domain mark. This is also marked as being in the public domain. It's a little bit of a different license, and I think I would have to have a law degree to explain the minute differences, but this is also one that I would click off at any time. Okay. The next part, you notice, has this little icon by all of them, and that means that you need to attribute these photos. So all of these photos I can use without telling you who took them, where they came from, any other information about the photo. So this is great if I'm looking for a photo about wind turbines, right? I can just grab this photo, I can put it into my brochure, my magazine. I have no worries about having to put a little tag on as to where I found it or who created it. But when I start getting into any other ones of these tell me that I'm going to need to put that attribution. If your magazine, your newsletter, your website isn't set up where you have attributions underneath photos, first of all, it's a good practice to just leave the space in case you do have that, because even your members who give you photos are going to want to be recognized for their work. So it's really good to obviously provide attribution to those photos. But if you don't have it set up that way, you're not going to want to download anything that looks like it has this little icon by it, okay? That's literally the only difference though here between these CC and the attribution than your public domains. So we do put attributions in our magazine, for example, so I can click that off. This one says you also have to credit the creator and share adaptations under the same terms. So that means if you take and you, let's say, flip this, you know, sometimes when you're making a post and you want to put some words over it, for example, like here, this beautiful post, I could put a few words over like, well done, good and faithful servant or something. But I might want the post on this side. So I use a program and I flip the image and it looks exactly the same. It's just is scaled to have everything on the opposite side. That's actually an adaptation. So if you have an adaptation, you still have to credit the author, and that's the same thing. Okay. This one says you must credit the author and you cannot use it for commercial use. So remember what I talked about, that your brochures, even your flyers for your local dinners, for example, a dinner where you practically make nothing off of serving spaghetti and what you do make you put back into a community service project is still for some considered commercial. And especially a legal team who doesn't know you at all may consider that commercial and come after you. And at that point, you're spending a lot of money or you're wasting a lot of time trying to explain how it was not a commercial endeavor because you weren't looking to make a profit. It was all going back into a community project, but it was a project that they didn't have any say over, and you used their work in order to get attention. So I stop right about here because I don't want to have to worry about that commercial or non-commercial use. Even our magazine, you know, in some cases can be considered commercial use because we do take subscriptions for it. So that's about where I stop clicking, if that makes sense. Just gonna go through the rest of these so you know. This one also means you have to credit the author, but no derivatives or adaptations are permitted. What does that mean? Remember how I talked about potentially taking this photo over here, flipping it and putting some words on it? That's considered an adaptation. So I have changed the photo because I've flipped it, but I've also changed it because I've put words on top of it. A derivative means I've used maybe a portion of it. For example, I could take this photo and I could somehow take out the skyline and just have a wire and some tulips in this post. That's considered a derivative. Even if it's a very tiny part of a much larger piece that I'm putting together, maybe I've put that with a number of other image elements, it's still considered a derivative because I started or I used as part of my base of my design someone else's work. So that means you can't reuse this in a different way. This one you can. I'm just using that as an example. But anything that says no derivatives or adaptations, you really can't play with. You've got to use the photo straight. All right. Credit the creator. Non-commercial uses share adaptations under the same terms. So you see some combination of some of these things that we saw above. And the final thing here is credit the creator, non-commercial uses, and no derivatives or adaptations permitted. So you see how they've combined some of the other things that we talked about above. So if you come to Creative Commons and you search for photos, these first four things under licenses, the CCO, the public domain, where you credit someone, where you credit the creator, or where you credit the creator, and you can share adaptations under the same terms, which in this case is crediting the creator. That is the four that I would recommend, but again, only if you are willing to offer credit in that byline for who the creator is. So let's say that I grab a photo that requires credit. Notice I've just checked these two off. Say I decide I do want to use this photo. This is the creator. His name or username is Jacksbot, sorry. And here is the way in which you would credit them. If you have a website, you credit them using this HTML. If you have like a newsletter, you would use this plain text. And if you have something where like a Word document or something like that, where links are applicable, you would use this because it has the links to where you found it, who was the creator, and what the creative license was. So this is good for newsletters, this is good for websites, and this is good for social media posts and things like that. So you would just copy that and paste it into whatever project you're working on. So this gives you a little bit of information about where it was found and what the license is and all that type of stuff. It also tells you a little bit about where it came from. So the tag was rural, remember, and Missouri. So this is what Missouri looks like, guys. This also allows you really quick share, and I like that because if I'm doing a quick post about something in rural America, I might just want to click on that. It'll take me directly to my Facebook. It may already have that image in there. So we'll see how that goes. All right. So Creative Commons is somewhere that I really highly recommend you save into your bookmarks bar. I think that you will appreciate that site quite a bit. That's a great place to get photos, but it is limited. I mean, there are a lot of photos out there, but remember that it says over 10,000 images just for the word rural alone. That was without narrowing our categories, right? So tons of images, but the drawback is, these are all based on people who are more than willing to share their work for free. There's a lot of people who would like to get a few cents every time somebody uses their work, and it makes sense. They've invested in their camera equipment, they've invested in their editing equipment, they've invested in driving to a place to get a great photo or setting up a photo shoot. And so it makes some sense that they would want to get something. So there are other sites out there that will require subscriptions in order for you to be a member of the site. And that subscription will allow you, like we said with Adobe Stock, to use any of the photos on that site, because when you choose a photo, it will give a share back to that content creator typically. All right, so get rid of that. So I'm going to go to a few other places where you can find photos. Let's say you went to Creative Commons and you just didn't find anything that felt right. You're looking for something really specific, like we talk a lot about rural broadband. And so if this is what I'm looking for out of what I have available to me on broadband, and I say none of these really feel quite like what I want as my photo, there's a couple other places that I recommend you go. So the first is called FreePick. I like FreePick a lot. I'm going to log out so you see it as the not paid version. I like FreePick a lot. We actually have a subscription to that as well. Our Adobe Stock subscription gives us 10 images a month. So $30, 10 images a month. It rolls over. So right now we have maybe 80 images available to us. So as long as we have that subscription, we have the number of images we've paid for that we can download at any time. But FreePick allows you as many pictures as you want in a month for your subscription. So we do have a subscription to that, and I start here a lot. What I like about it is it has not just photos, but it also has those illustrations, or what some people would, what we used to call, those things that were in Word documents. Oh my goodness, clip art. Sorry guys, I'm losing my mind. So what we used to call clip art, it has things like that, kind of more modern version. So if I were to go here and type in the word rural, I'm going to see things like these vector arts, these illustrations. I'm going to see photos. And obviously, you know what you're looking for here, but a lot of times we're looking for photos. So you can go over to the side where it says filters, and you can create a filter just for photos. So now we are down here. Remember how I said rural broadband? We cover that a lot. We might have a story in one of your state newsletters or your local newsletter or something with rural broadband, or you might have a post on your social media account or something on your website. Here is a fantastic image that you could use for rural broadband. So I'm going to click on that. It tells you FreePick license, free and personal and commercial purpose with attribution. So, okay. This license summary tells me I'm allowed to modify it. I'm allowed to use it anywhere. I'm allowed to use it as many times as I want. I'm allowed to put it on my website. I'm allowed to put it in my newsletter. I'm allowed to put it in my brochure or my flyer, or just personal projects if I wanted to hang it up on my wall. So that tells you what's going on with this photo license. That's one of the reasons why I really like this. Notice it says, and commercial purposes with attribution. So free for personal and commercial purposes with attribution. How do I attribute? This is really important because, again, remember, you can use all of these for free. You just have to make sure you're doing that one right extra step to show that you acknowledge where it came from. FreePick is curating all these images. They are giving you a free resource. So they expect you to let people know to come back to them. So if you're putting it on the web, you would just copy this link. I hit copy and so now it's gone, but there you go, you can see. You see that it will create a link on your page. So that's what you would use on the web. Printed elements. So you can use, insert the attribution line close to where you're using the resource. If it's not possible, place it in the credits section. So for example, image, freepick.com. So literally all you have to do underneath the image in your newsletter, let's say, sorry, realize I'm still screen sharing, hang on. So all you would have to do underneath your image in your newsletter, right here maybe, would say freepick.com or courtesy of freepick.com. That's literally all you have to do to attribute it. But if you don't do that, you can get yourself in some trouble. So make sure that if you're using an image from one of these free sites, you do what it says to do for attribution. I don't think most of you are using these to make videos, but if you are, this is where you can put this in your video description. And finally, apps and games. So if you're creating an app or creating a game, I don't know that any of you are, but this is that you're copying. And I'm sure if you're doing that, you probably know most of this stuff already. At that point, you can just download this. Again, free download. You must attribute the author. So we're going to click on that, and it will come up. Your computer will look different because you probably are not using a Mac. If you are, you'll understand probably where we're going with this, but you would find wherever that downloaded, you'll see it downloads as a zip. Typically, all you have to do is double click that file. It means it took a large amount of information and it compressed it. So if you double click that file, hopefully sharing is paused. All right, I'm gonna stop the share. We're gonna go to my desktop. Oh, no, we're not. Okay. Sorry, guys. All right. Once we went to my desktop and I found that, now let's see if I can share. I can. All right. You notice that I have a folder, and that folder has inside the image, it also has the information about my free license. So if I had forgotten to copy that attribution, or if I needed to know how to do it in print, it'll give me all of that information again. The one thing it notes is you're not allowed to sub-license or resell or rent it. What does that mean? Well, you can't create a website, put this image on there, and sell it for $20. You could take this image, make it into a poster, sell that poster, but you're not reselling the digital image. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Okay, and you can't include it on any online or offline archive or database. So what does that mean? Well, specifically, you shouldn't be kind of stockpiling these things and allowing access by multiple users all over the place who just want to find different pictures. So basically, you're not becoming a competitor of FreePick. I don't think any of you guys are going to be doing that, so we're not worried too much about those issues. But this has given you information about your license. And then you see you've got your picture, nice giant size. This you can use for your social media postings, you can use for your website, you can use in all different ways. So that gives you a little bit of an overview. I know some of you by now have had some questions, so I'm gonna go and I'm gonna look at the questions real quick and try and answer some things. So bear with me as I root around here. All right, oh boy, lots of them, okay. Hi guys. All right, so I know a couple of you are having problems with sound. Just make sure that you've clicked that button on the right of the video screen. It's down there to see if you can click and not have it muted, okay? Oh boy, there's some discussion going on that doesn't have anything to do with this, so, all right. All right, so we don't have any questions yet, so I'll just remind you, you're welcome to ask questions in the comments. And thank you guys so much for watching so far. I'm gonna go back in just a second, so, all right. I'm gonna go back in just a second and get us back onto our shared screen. I'm gonna show you a couple more tricks and tips, okay? All right, so we're screen sharing again. I've now shown you FreePick. So remember, I've shown you Creative Commons. This is FreePick, really like FreePick. You can also become a member of FreePick. I don't tend to tell Grange members to buy many of these services because you don't use them as often. And frankly, if there's some image that you really want and can't find using the free version or can't do attribution for, I obviously can't just download it in the pro version and give you it and let you use it without attribution, but I may be able to find it on another site and use it on our media and let you use it as well. But there are some limitations to that. But you'll notice $8.25 a month, so $99 a year to be able to use all of the pictures, over 7.5 million sources or resources. So if you're looking to do a subscription, $100 a year is not bad. But again, I just don't normally tell our Granges to do that. All right, so another very similar website is Pixabay. It does, again, have photos, illustrations, vectors, videos, music. This is good to know because some of you do create some videos and you use some music tracks in the background. So it's the same idea. You can't just use someone's music on your video, especially if you're going to monetize it. So you can look through here, see if there's something that you like, you can download it, you can use it in your video. So here you can see some of those audio tracks, right? But for now, we're going to go to photos. And let's say we're going to look here in rural again. So in rural here, the first couple images you see are different. I appreciate the fact that Pixabay often has things that some of the other places don't. So I mentioned sheep earlier, or well, I mentioned goats, but whatever. I mentioned sheep. So I clicked on this sheep. I like this photo. I want to download it. I'm going to look at the license. It says free for commercial use, no attribution required. Fantastic. This means I don't even have to put that little line. So I can just download this and I can choose whether I want a small photo or a large photo or in between. If you're using this on a website, typically you can use something that's one of these smaller ones like 640 by 480 or 1280 by 960. Facebook, that'll work there. If you're using this in your print publication, especially if you're using it, more than really small, very tiny file size, you should be trying to download one of these bigger versions. So I'm going to hit download there. I am not a robot, so I will show them that I am not. And this says crediting is not required, but linking back is greatly appreciated and allows our image authors to gain exposure. So if you wanted to, this is when this attribution line comes up and you can copy that. So just an option if you're interested. Again, that's your choice. You can decide to or not to attribute that. So I will look at that image that came down. Beautiful. You can see that that's been downloaded. So, all right. So Pixabay is also a great place. All right, the next one is Pexels. Pexels is another great place where you can find some different photos. All of these different sites, some of them pull from the same open Creative Commons or public domain places. So you will find some photos that are the same across many of these, but then a lot of them have associations with different photographers who want to use these platforms as a way to get their photos out there, to get their name out there, to show that their photos are being used in different places, and then hopefully get commercial work later, get paid for their work. And so that's why you'll see, people have chosen to put this up here. But I've typed in rural, so we're going to look through here. You can see some of this stuff, not always exactly like what you're thinking when you think of rural. But sometimes you'll come up with something that you hadn't even thought, wow, I can use that later. So let's click on our tomatoes here. So you can see who created it. You can choose what file size you want. I almost always choose the original because I'd rather have the biggest file size and then be able to make it smaller for publications if I need to, but make sure I don't have to go back and get a bigger one. And I hit free download. Same thing here. It'll tell you, set a link back to this photo. You can use the following text and you can copy this, but you do not need to attribute here in Pexels. So if any of these strike your fancy, you can download there and you can use them on your website or your Facebook or anything like that. What I like about Pexels is that, let's say, your website has like an orange feel, orange gold. And so you're hoping for a color, a photo that kind of feels like what your website already has in it. So I said orange gold, right? So I can actually choose by color and prioritize what, and this says red. No. Anyway, I can prioritize by red or yellow. So you can't maybe get too specific, but I'm looking for a photo that has, the color scheme that I want. And so you'll notice that all of these now have prioritized your color scheme. So that's a beautiful wheat photo there that has some orange. Okay, so Pexel's great site as well. Last one for these is called Unsplash. Unsplash, another great place, internet source of freely usable images. If you click on that, you'll see they talk a little bit about their license. You can use them for commercial and non-commercial purposes. You do not need to ask permission or provide credit, although it's appreciated, and it grants you irrevocable, non-exclusive, worldwide copyright license to download, copy, modify, distribute, perform or use photos from Unsplash for free, including commercial purposes. So this has given you very broad blanket rights. And I think that obviously seeing that, knowing you downloaded something from here should give you a little bit of security and feeling like you're doing what you need to do to keep your Grange out of trouble. Here's a great photo, grass backgrounds. And so again, you don't see any issue with the photo. You can see a little bit of information about the photo, when it was taken or published, I should say, how many times it's been viewed, how many times it's been downloaded. But you would just download for free. Again, I normally pick the original size. If you really wanted to, you can look at who took it here and where they took it there. And a lot of them put little descriptions, so that's perfect. So this one is called Unsplash. All right, so Creative Commons, Pixabay, Free Pick, Pexels, and Unsplash. I know that's a lot. I will make sure to put these in the comments. I apologize for not being able to do that. The last thing I just wanted to show you is we talked a little bit about the idea of kind of graphics, and there's a place called Vexels. I'm not quite as hot on Vexels as I am finding some of these graphic resources in some other places, but you can certainly come here. So let's say that you really, really love this cow photo. You want to use it on your next brochure. These require you to pay for a license or to subscribe. So if you absolutely can't find a graphic, not a photo, but a graphic anywhere else, you may want to try Vexels. I like it because it's only $5 and it gives you the license pretty much for everything except for merchandise. You can't sell it on shirts. You can't sell it on mugs. You can't do that. But outside of that, it's only $5 if you wanted to put this on your website or you wanted to put it on like a poster or something or a brochure. So in that case, it's a good site, but again, it's not really one of my top favorites. So just wanted to touch on that. All right. So Unsplash is probably one of my favorites, like I said, just because it is so open, and Katie Squire mentioned that as well. She's a teacher. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so I'm going to look and see if there's any questions. I noticed that Oregon State Grange has asked the question about watermarks. She's had people she's had to tell a couple Granges that they can't print one of their flyers in the state paper because the graphic was watermarked. That should absolutely be true. If that graphic is watermarked, it is likely downloaded without license or permission. You'll notice, I kept the screen share up for a reason. You'll notice that if you go, let's see, if you go and type in something on Google and you're trying to find an image that you like, and now I'm not going to be able to find a watermarked one, watch. You're trying to find an image that you like and it has a watermark on it. The reason that the photographer has put that watermark on there, I swear we're going to find one, is because they don't want their photo shared, stolen, used without permission. And so there is that protection that they've kind of put on, because it doesn't look professional when you have a photo on your flyer or your website or something that clearly shows that you have not purchased or gotten whatever permissions you want to use it. You've just stolen it. You basically have been caught red-handed. You've outed yourself by using a photo with a watermark. Here's a great example. Okay, so you see the copyright Deborah L. Ferguson, right? So if I would just say I'm going to use this photo because I like it, and that copyright is there, you would look at it and you'd be like, wow, that kind of looks unprofessional. And inherently you would know that, but legally you should know that I didn't get the permission probably to use that. That's why it's coming up with that copyright. And so, yeah, you definitely should not be printing something that has a watermark on it, unless it's from a photographer who you have purchased it from and you have made an agreement with them that they can put their watermark on in order to publicize their business, and you are okay with the visual image of that watermark being on there. And in that case, it probably will be something fairly professionally done in a corner or something like that. They have attributed it here, but it still makes you wonder if they paid for this or if this is a legal use. I assume AgFax did, but who knows? So anyway, if you just download a photo online and it has a watermark on it and you use it, there are a number of us who will get really, really anxious inside because we know that that probably means you don't have the permission to use it. You haven't paid for use. You haven't gotten an agreement for use. And that's a real problem because, again, unless your Grange has $400, $800, $1,200, $2,500 to blow on using just a wrong photo, and I don't think many of our Granges have that. And frankly, I don't think any of our Granges should have that much money to blow that they aren't using on good community work, because that's $2,500 or $800 or $400 that you could put towards good service, not towards kind of cleaning up a mess. Please get the permissions, or please use photos that are out there in common use. There are very few times that you can't find it there, but if you can't, somebody in your Grange may be able to create that photo for you. Okay. You'll notice that when you Google something, there's a lot of images that come up from Shutterstock. They have, again, that watermark on it. It says Shutterstock across the image. Again, Shutterstock is a paid service. The only reason that you are seeing that image come up, with that watermark on it is because the watermark is there so that go pay and buy this image in order to be able to use it legally. So if you see that image, if you see that watermark, you definitely do not need to be downloading that photo without getting the permissions, without purchasing that. Please don't do that. The last thing is, copyright law is a real thing. And whether we like it or not, I mean, there's a lot of things in this life that we don't like having to deal with. But, legal systems certainly are fraught with these. But that doesn't mean that it's not legal. It doesn't mean that it is not something that we have to follow. I don't particularly like wearing my seatbelt, but there's a law in Pennsylvania that says I have to. And if I ever got stopped by a police officer, I would get a fine. And I can't just say, well, I don't like wearing my seatbelt, so I shouldn't have to pay this. It's the same idea with, I don't like having to track down and make sure that all of my photos are something that I can fairly use. It would be so much easier if I could just go to Google and use whatever I wanted. But that's not the way life works. We can't have whatever we want. If we could, I'd be 120 pounds and I'd eat cake every night. So it's kind of that same idea. I know that a lot of you have a lot of questions about, how to use things, how to make them look good and whatever. And previously we had a workshop or one of these on doing brochures. So I'm going to give you one last thing. And my reason for that is because I lauded the benefits of using this platform called Canva when we were here before. And I feel like it's just a really good time to come back and tell you how important or how nice of a product this is. Again, Canva you can use for free. So I'm going to sign out of my paid version again. And I'm going to sign up. I hate doing this. I'm going to sign up for a new account with an account I've never used. There we go. Yeah. That way you can see a free version, because I feel like it's unfair for me to show you what you'll get and then some of it's actually just in the paid version. So, no, we don't want to do any of that. Maybe later. All right. I mentioned that Canva is great, and I mentioned that in it has some photos that you can use. Every one of the photos that you search here, you can use for free. So if I type rural in here, you can use any one of them that doesn't have this nice little pro mark, 100% for free. So I like that one. That's kind of pretty. That looks a little bit like some of your hometowns areas maybe. That photo has already been cleared. All of these copyright things are behind you. You didn't have to go find stuff at another website. You didn't have to worry about any of that. You didn't have to read any of those little fine print details. You know, if you have chosen a photo from the site, it's free. Now, let's say I had chosen a photo that had one of these little pro marks. I like this photo. All right. Notice that it put watermarks over here. Those things that we had talked about earlier, these watermarks. Certainly, you could go about designing your thing, or you could just download this and you could use it, and it could have that giant Canva watermark. But you are screaming to somebody that you use this without permission. And hopefully it's not the wrong somebody who has a cease and desist letter in their hands. So if you click remove watermark, it will ask you to pay $1 for the image. $1 is a fantastic price for stock photos if you have to pay for a photo. If you finally get to the point where you say, this is the photo, I have to have this photo, $1 is a great price. So you can purchase that. But there is a way, typically, there used to be a way that you could filter out seeing these pro photos. I guess they've taken that away since I last looked. So, I mean, they've still designated them pretty easily. So you want to go through and you want to look, and anything that comes up and says free, like this one. What a fantastic photo for being free. Anyway, you're going to want to look and find a photo on there that you like. You just click on it, and there it is. If you found a photo that you really like at one of those other sites that we talked about, like, you know, on Unsplash or something, remember I downloaded that photo? You can go into your Canva, you can hit uploads here, upload an image, and pick the one that you got, which for me, it was that one. Just upload it, and there it is, and you can use this. Now remember, you did a lot of work to make sure that this photo was something that you could use, and you've determined that the copyright allowed you to use it without attribution on Unsplash, et cetera, et cetera. But if you brought over one of those other photos that we told you that you need to put attribution to here, you're not out of the woods. At that point, if this was one of the photos, we're going to put one of those up here, that you needed to put attribution for, this one didn't require it either. Okay. Okay, you would have to go back. You would have to find that image again, and you would have to make sure that you are able to put that credit line, or if you use that photo without that credit line, you could be in trouble. Even though you're using it through Canva, remember I told you that all their photos are okay for you to use. But the photos that you bring in from these sites, you still have to run by the site rules. So Unsplash, remember, will never make you credit the photos. But here, this photo, you might have to actually give credit. And if you do, it's a great time to just click on text, create the text here. We're gonna create it in white so you can see it, and put photo by whomever it was, JC Swenson. That's not correct. I'm clearly not publishing that with that incorrect information. But you see, I've made it small. It doesn't have to be large or egregious. It just has to be there. And so if I were to use this photo, I would make sure that I have the correct attribution down there. I would make sure I'd have it, it's at 14 points. I can probably even go down to 8. I would make sure I'd have that photo attribution in here, small, somewhere off to the side. But that keeps me legal. Remember, I have to do that if I bring a photo in from a site that required attribution. But again, if I'm just using a photo from here that's free, like this one, I don't have to do any of that, which is great. So at that point, I could just delete that attribution line, move my photo into place where I want it, and all of a sudden I have something that I can work from without any worries about copyright issues. So I keep telling you that I love this program, Canva. I love this program, Canva, because I know that I am safe using whatever photos they've given me. It encapsulates all of this stuff, and it's really pretty simple to use. So I could put like Happy Cowboy Day really easily here. Just drag it down, and you notice it even tells me kind of where the correct positioning is. With those purple guidelines, it's telling me it is perfectly centered, and it's telling me it's, you know, far enough up and off the line where it looks good. I might still pull it down just a hair, and there we go. You'd have an easy, simple post that you could put up on your social media or something you could put on your website and easily like. So I'm back here with you. I'm going to check on our comments and questions. I apologize that this is a little disjointed just because it's only me, but hopefully, you know, we'll get through this. All right, last couple questions. Katie Squire asked if they have a member take a picture, should they get a written agreement for the use of it? I like having something in writing, even if it's just an email. And that's typically, you know, the way that I'm able to do a lot of these things, because at least I have the email to fall back on. So if I ask, for example, Lindsay Schrader of Pennsylvania, hey, can you go get me a photo of some people playing in a waterfall down near you in Pennsylvania? She'll go do that. I have the email where I've requested it. I have the email back from her saying, here's the photos. And somewhere in there, I'll note what I'm going to use it for. So I don't think that you always need something as formal as an agreement. However, it depends. It depends kind of on how well you know that member, you know, and where you're going to use that image. If I would use an image from Lindsay, for example, for a billboard where we're hoping to get lots of money in for something, I would probably want an agreement with her. Because maybe we make so much money that I feel like we should pay her for that image. Or maybe I just want to make sure that, you know, at some point she doesn't come back and say, boy, you made $1 million because everybody saw my beautiful image and responded to it and came to the Grange and I never got paid a dime. And so just to kind of temper expectations, I might have something physical and written in place. Last thing that we have a question on so far, and I'll just remind you, this is kind of last call on questions on this subject. Steve Coy asked, I've noticed when printing obituary, there's a photo attached, it prints with a watermark. That's correct. So strangely, and I used to do obituaries at our newspaper, places like Legacy, funeral homes and things will oftentimes collect from the family photos, and they don't want those photos to be used in ways that would dishonor the dead. So they typically will have the family sign documents that say that they will protect the photo. Well, how can they do that when they release this photo to a news service, and that news service, that newspaper, whatever, has a website, and anybody like me who doesn't know any better or doesn't care could go grab a photo of an old lady and maybe stick that up with an advertisement about how this old lady loved my adult diapers, and maybe that old lady never had adult diapers in her life, and I've now just kind of defamed her, or she did, but she wouldn't want anybody to know that. So oftentimes the funeral home or the place that's dealing with the remains will watermark those photos, or they'll work with a service like Legacy to have those photos watermarked, so it doesn't allow you to just grab them. So it makes it a little harder for us if we're doing, for example, a Grange publication and we want to put in, which we do here in our Grange publication, obituaries. So sometimes what we end up needing to do is contact the family, which is awful because they've just lost somebody that we are trying to honor and remember, and ask for a digital photo. Or we have to contact the funeral home because they may have the original digital or the original printed copy, and ask them if we can have it and refer to the fact that they were referenced in the obituary as a Grange member. Sometimes that works. Sometimes we have to contact the news outlet, although most of the time that doesn't really suffice. And finally, sometimes we have to rely on our own records and just hope that somebody has a photo that we're able to use. That, of course, is also giving a little bit of fraternal trust. If you have a photo of said person who is now deceased, that their family would want us to have that photo. So it's much better, even though it's kind of awful, to reach out to the family if you get to a point where you can't get a photo without a watermark on it. But legally, you can't just take the photo off of a website where the obituary is and put it into your Grange news. So I know that none of this is fun because we all just want to be able to go out and grab whatever we want or need, get our stuff done. We're a good organization. We're a nonprofit. We don't get too blurred and buried in controversy, and so everything that we do should be just fine for somebody to accept. But unfortunately, that's just not the way this works. And sometimes the creators have almost lost the ability to make the decisions because they've given those decisions off to a large legal company. For example, the Associated Press, which is the organization that represents most, if not all, journalists. It's the wire service that collects photos and information, and you see those stories running in all different places. If you take an Associated Press photo, you're not paying the photographer, the photojournalist's salary. Their outlet is, and their outlet is paying to be part of the Associated Press. And the Associated Press gives, of course, those partner outlets a lot of benefits, including enforcing the copyright. So if you have not made sure that you have permission to use that photo and credited it appropriately, if you did get permission, a company called Pick Rights will email you and tell you that you have a copyright infringement claim against you, and that you are going to need to pay several hundred or more dollars in order to close that claim. And it does not matter if you take that photo down, if you write an apology, or if you post in somewhere that you did wrong, you will still have to pay that because it's required. So it's not your property. It's kind of like going next door and stealing your neighbor's lawnmower and saying, but I really wanted to mow my lawn and your lawnmower seems like it's great. It doesn't matter. You need to have permission. You need to make sure to basically thank the person for that permission, which is that attribution of who gave you that photo. And you need to make sure that if you needed to pay for something that you've done that. So not fun, but definitely a really important thing. And the last thing I should say is this. If your local Grange gets caught putting something on a flyer, something on social media, something on a website that is not yours, and we get contacted at the national level about an infringement that you didn't answer, you will be held accountable. That is your responsibility to make sure that you're doing what you need to do. So the buck doesn't stop with us in that case because we have no control over the content that you're putting up. It doesn't matter if you know or don't know. Copyright law is one of the areas where they say it doesn't matter. It's your responsibility. So just make sure that when you're getting your photos, when you're getting your illustrations and that type of stuff, you're using it and you're using it in the way that you're told that you're able to use it. You're crediting properly where you need to, and making sure that you kind of check all those boxes, because the end result would be it comes back to hurt your Grange financially. So we don't want to have that happen. I hope that I've covered everything. This is a really complex subject, so I hope I've covered everything as as easily, digestibly as possible. And hopefully you guys are all kind of taking a really good look at what products you have out there, because the other thing is, especially if it lives online, it doesn't matter that you did it 10 years ago. If it's still on your website, it's something that you can get nabbed for. Like I said, National Grange has not had much of this problem, but we've had it in the past as well. And it doesn't matter how long it's been up, or where the original photo came from, or anything like that. If you've broken copyright, you've broken copyright. So I hope you guys will give a good hard look to your sites, to what you're using on your Facebook and your social media channels, to what you're doing in your newsletter. And if you're concerned about it, the best practice is to take it down and start again. And I'm more than happy to kind of give advice or steer you in a direction if necessary, if you've got a question above what I can answer. Hopefully, though, this has given you a good primer. And the last thing I'll just remind you, Creative Commons, Unsplash, Canva, Pixabay, Pixabay, Pexels, Pexels, and FreePik, FREPIK, are all of my favorite sites. So I'm going to put those in the comments as soon as we're done. Hopefully you'll go and you will bookmark those, and we'll be seeing some great visual images from you on your different sites and pages and all of those things in the coming weeks and months and years as you guys get rolling with projects again. So thanks for joining today. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow.